So a shocking new poll just came out showing Kamala Harris up 11 points on Donald Trump in the state of Michigan. But when I think about it, is it really that shocking that she's leading Donald Trump in some polls by 11 points? Forget the fact that Donald Trump was leading Joe Biden by 7 polls in a poll that came out right before Joe Biden dropped out of the election, essentially forced out of the election by the Democrat and the left-wing media. Now, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is not only is the media going to lie and cover for Kamala Harris and her record, and they're retconning everything that she's ever done right out of existence, but they're also not going to ask her any tough questions. So naturally, they're going to be putting on this show to say that Kamala Harris is absolutely crushing it nationally and she's going to run away with it. It's going to be Reagan of 84 type of victory for Kamala Harris. Now, don't believe it. When I talk about this poll, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to jump right into this poll. So the big thing to me on this poll, you see in Michigan, it came out yesterday, was Bloomberg Morning Consult. Michigan plus 11 for Kamala Harris. You see a couple of the other swing states, Arizona, Harris plus 2, Wisconsin, Harris plus 2, Nevada, Harris plus 2, Georgia even, but Pennsylvania, Harris minus 4. So Trump plus 4 in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, the biggest thing to me is the difference, the gap between Minnesota and Pennsylvania. Now, why would you put a poll out like this when you have, Michigan and Pennsylvania, when you have Michigan and Pennsylvania 15 points apart? There has to be something flawed in this poll. What it is, I don't know. I haven't dove into the crosstabs, but I will tell you this, it is clearly flawed. I look back to 1988, since 1988, and those two states, not only do they vote for the same candidate, so showing Trump plus 4, almost outside of the margin of error, and then Kamala plus 11, which is way outside of the margin of error, which is essentially a landslide victory for Kamala Harris in the state of Michigan. Not only are they not going the same way for the same candidate, which traditionally those two states have and have for at least the last 50 years, but the gap of 15 points is the most telling to me that there's something clearly flawed in this poll. Now, I look back since 1988, and the largest percentage gap between Michigan and Pennsylvania in terms of how much more they voted for the candidate that ultimately won that particular state. And like I said, since then, it's always been the same candidate. It's always been a Democrat or a Republican on the same election cycle. The biggest gap is 6.1 points. The average during that time is less than a 3-point percentage difference of how Pennsylvania and Michigan voted for the candidate that won that state. So when I see something like a 15-point gap, there's something majorly flawed with this poll. Speaking of flawed polls, yesterday also a Harvard-Harris poll came out showing Donald Trump leading Vice President Harris by 3 points nationally. But the biggest thing, and shout out to Colin Rugg for pointing this out, the biggest thing is when you dive into the crosstabs of this one, and this poll is from July 26th through the 28th of 2024, it's a large oversampling of Democrats. It's 883 Democrats. If you see this big box here, this red box, 883 Democrats versus 654 Republicans. So there's something way off about this poll as well, showing Trump up 3 points in an oversampling of Democrats. That would suggest that Trump's going to absolutely wallop Kamala Harris, whereas you have the other poll showing Kamala Harris winning every swing state with exception of Pennsylvania and a tie in Georgia and leading Michigan by 11 points. There's something off about these polling. There's obviously going to be this Kamala Harris moment. It's somebody pointed out to me there was a Michael Dukakis moment back in 1988 when Reagan was termed out and George H.W. Bush was running against Dukakis. He was up 7 points in the polls in July, and then all of a sudden things took a dramatic turn in Bush's favor. So you kind of saw that with Trump. You saw a huge turn after he walloped Biden in the election, and the media, for some reason, pretended like they didn't know that Biden was cognitively declined. And this was all news to them, throwing him under the bus. Then the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, his odds go even higher. RNC happens, and then Biden drops out. Now you have this new love affair with the media and the Democratic Party, as if They didn't admit that Kamala Harris was one of the, if not the worst VPs of all time. Her approval rating was in the tank. Now all of a sudden she's like -4 in approval rating. So the way that they're able to shift the narrative, I just want people to know that it's going to happen. Don't get flustered. Don't get overexcited or nervous about about what's happening. This, to me, unless Biden stayed in, which didn't seem like was in the cards, was to be expected with whoever they replaced Joe Biden with. Now, keep in mind, Kamala can win. I just don't think it's as close as they're making it seem. Same thing with what I was saying before. So if you watched my election update videos prior to Joe dropping out, the assassination attempt on Trump, I was telling people not to get too excited that want Donald Trump to get elected. They started putting all these states on the map. They were, Trump was going to get 750,000 electoral votes. It was going to be the biggest landslide anyone's ever seen. And I was telling people to pump the brakes now. I'm telling people to pump the brakes again here. But there are things that I want to show you. So this is the betting odds on Real Clear Politics as of today. It shows Trump 52, Harris 42. I don't know why they have small percentages for all these other candidates. We're clearly not going to win. Maybe Kennedy, if you really think there's going to be some type of cataclysmic event. But the key thing to look at is here. And this is the betting average. If you look here, you see the gap. This is right before the debate, and it says Trump plus 15.7% versus at that time Biden. But you also see this right here because there was odds that Biden was going to get replaced, which he ultimately did get replaced. This was the assassination attempt right here. And then all of a sudden, in the last couple of days, the odds have shrunk significantly to Trump plus 10% to win the election over Kamala Harris. But if you look basically here, it's going to be kind of hard to see, but right here is where the percentages, which is 52%, that is basically in line with right before the debate. So nothing has really changed all that much, except the sentiment is clearly in Kamala Harris's favorite, clearly in her corner right now. But she just got the position. It's been 10 days since she earned the Democratic nomination. So there's obviously going to be excitement. The media is going to be playing defense for her from now until the election. She eventually will have to answer questions, even though they will be softballs. If you famously remember her talking to Lester Holt, he asked her if she planned to go to the border, and she couldn't even answer that. She said that she'd never been to Europe either, when he said, well, you haven't actually been to the border. So that's how ill-prepared this woman is. She couldn't even make it to the Iowa primaries back in 2020. People generally don't like her. That is going to come out here in the next couple of months. I think Trump clearly has an easy path to victory. People just need to pump the brakes a little bit and calm down. So here's the Real Clear Politics polling average of Trump versus Biden. You see, looks like it was going to be an absolute landslide. The closest state here was Michigan, Trump +2. Every other state is Trump +3 or more. So it looked like Trump was cruising to victory and was going to pick up a lot of the Electoral College and clearly going to be the heavy favorite to win. Things have gotten a little bit more balanced. Realistically, where we are today on July 31st is very similar to where we were prior to the debate, which was the end of June. So we're about the same spot where we were at 5 weeks ago in terms of the odds. The polling might be a little bit more in Kamala's corner right now, but I think that was to be expected as the excitement of the unknown, so to speak, is still there and eventually will wear off. So here is the swing state odds that I will be going off of here. We look at North Carolina. That hasn't really changed, so I think the odds makers are usually a pretty good indication of where we are. Trump still got a 60+% in Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, roughly 2/3 for every single one of those states. Percent chance to win. They still favored 55-45 in Wisconsin, 53-47 in Michigan, and then Kamala is favored 52-48 in the state of Pennsylvania. And I thought that all along these three states were going to be the states that they needed to focus on for the Democrats, and they were going to be the states where essentially they were all coin tosses. They could go either way. But obviously, if Trump only needs one of them, that heavily favored him. So here's the map. It's a blank map right now, but I'm going to go right ahead, and I'm just going to start filling in the obvious Democrat votes. So you got California, You got Oregon, Washington, the entire West Coast. Hawaii wouldn't be something if Hawaii, because of Maui, didn't go for Kamala. However, that doesn't seem realistic. New Mexico, Colorado, those are the blue states out west. Then we start moving east. You got Minnesota. I know people were putting this on the map. I don't believe it's going to be on the map. The last time it went for a Republican wasn't even in the Ronald Reagan landslide of 1984. That was the only state that did not go for Republicans. That and the swamp of D.C. The last time was Nixon's re-election campaign in 1972, where Nixon only lost one state. That was Massachusetts, and obviously the swamp. So I'm not putting Minnesota in it. I know it's polling relatively close. Maybe if we get some more information, things change. I would consider calling it a toss-up, but I don't foresee that happening. You got Illinois. City of Chicago runs the state of Illinois. That's not going to change anytime soon. New York, clearly a blue state. I know Trump was playing for it. New Hampshire, Vermont. I know people were saying, oh, New Hampshire's in play. I never believed it for a second. I'm going to give them all the northeastern states because these are realistically out of play for Donald Trump, including the swamp that is D.C. And then the state of Maine, they're saying it's close. I don't believe it's that close. So realistically, Biden's going to win the popular vote. He's going to win District 1 in Maine, and Trump is likely going to win District 2 in Maine. So starting off, right off the bat, if you say take all the swing states out, Democrats have 225. Then you have a lot of states to fill in for Trump that are likely to stay or end up in his column, which are ones that he won before. Sorry, I didn't know why I filled in Nevada. But you can see here as we fill out the map that there is a slight edge to Republicans just when you give them the likely states that are going to be won. Now, I'm going to fill in a couple of states that they might be putting in as swing states. Ohio, I don't believe, is one of them. And they're not even really considering Ohio a swing state. Same thing with Florida. But the state of North Carolina, realistically, if Trump loses the state of North Carolina, he's not going to win enough states outside of North Carolina to regain the presidency. So I have been giving Trump the state of North Carolina. Sorry, we gave Congressional District 2 in Nebraska is likely to go to Biden. They're saying it might be somewhat of a toss-up. It'll be interesting if it is. I'll leave it as a toss-up for now. But Trump will win Congressional District number 2 in all likelihood in the state of Maine. So you're looking at 225 to 235, a 10 electoral vote gap right now between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Realistically, it starts with Georgia. It ends with outside of North Carolina. Again, if he doesn't win North Carolina, there really is not a path for Donald Trump. I believe he will. The odds having him over 75%, they believe they will. Georgia has been consistently in the low to high 60s in terms of percentage chance that Donald Trump wins it. I think that's where Trump and the Trump campaign will focus the most, and that really opens up the map for Donald Trump. So that makes the most sense for him to regain Georgia, just based on not only the emphasis that they're going to place on Georgia, but the historical voting pattern of Georgia. Georgia is traditionally a red state. The last time prior to 2020 that it went blue was back in 1992. That was kind of a weird election with Ross Perot being in it. It was very close between Bush and Clinton. Clinton ended up winning it. A lot of people believe that if Perot wasn't in it, it would have gone to Bush. But nonetheless, it looks like it'll open up for him. Pennsylvania is going to be an interesting state. I don't know. And as we sit right now with no VP pick, if the odds are showing Kamala Harris that I just showed you, the polls are showing Donald Trump. I think, but they're showing the odds are showing Michigan for Trump, but the polls are showing Michigan for Harris. Shapiro is likely going to be the pick as of right now for Kamala Harris. That, I think, most likely gives the state to Kamala. It's not that it can't be won. If he was the top of the ticket, I would say that it's off the board. He's not going to be top of the ticket. Obviously, Kamala Harris is going to be top of the ticket. So it is in play for both Trump and Kamala Harris right now. I think there's a slight, in my opinion, I believe there's a slight edge to Trump in the state of Pennsylvania, especially since that's where the assassination attempt was. I just think that there's going to be people in that state that will rally around that, blue-collar workers. If Shapiro is on the ticket, I think it will favor Kamala. And realistically, when you look at the math, if I gave that state to Donald Trump, that's 270. That's what he needs to win the Electoral College, assuming he's able to regain Georgia from one of the states that he lost back in 2020. I think she's going to go with Shapiro for that reason, and maybe that reason alone is knowing that if you think that Trump is going to regain Georgia and hold on to North Carolina, which I think is very likely, that Pennsylvania ends the election. It just completely ends the election. So I think she's going to go with Shapiro. That will give her the slight edge. So in that case, I will give Pennsylvania to the Democrats. I think that there are some issues, though, with picking Josh Shapiro because he's Jewish, and they seem to have a Jewish problem right now in the Democratic Party. So that's not going to bode well for a place like Dearborn, Michigan, even though Shapiro's somewhat of a moderate. They don't like Jewish people. They just don't. The Palestinian population that are in it's pretty heavily in Minnesota, so maybe even puts Minnesota on the map. I'm not saying it that it's definitely going to do it, but it could possibly do that. But it definitely makes Michigan a harder win for Kamala Harris. But realistically, if that's the math, they need to win Pennsylvania. I think he makes a sweep of these southern states. Donald Trump. I think he holds on, and the math and the odds right now are showing Arizona and Nevada being very likely to go to Donald Trump. I know Nevada has been a blue state over the last 20 years or so. Last time that a Republican won it was George W. Bush in his re-election campaign in 2004. But the polls have been very much in Trump's favor, showing him +4, +5, and really, I don't think there's been a poll other than the one that I just showed you earlier that had the Democrat in the lead. So it seems pretty safe right now. Again, some of these crazy numbers for Kamala are going to subside. It's going to balance out. You're going to start seeing tighter polls as we get closer to election on both sides of the aisle, unless you're in a state like California, which is clearly going to go for Democrat. So that leaves two states on the board. You got Wisconsin and Michigan. If those both go for Democrats, it then goes to Kamala Harris, assuming that congressional district number 2 goes with Kamala Harris, because that gives her exactly 270. If congressional district number 2 goes to Donald Trump and they hold the blue wall, as they call it, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, it's a 269 to 269 tie. It then would go to the House of Representatives, where presumably Donald Trump would prevail in January. But I don't think that's likely. I think that congressional district does stay with Kamala Harris, but I also think with the pick of Shapiro, it's crazy as it seems, and I said earlier that this isn't a normal election. This isn't your Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama, your George W. Bush versus John Kerry type of election. Donald Trump throws a wrench in things. The issue with the Palestinians and the Israelis throws a wrench in things. If she picks Josh Shapiro, I could see Michigan then flipping to Trump. Wisconsin's kind of up in the air. Right now it's favoring Donald Trump. So I will stick with that prediction and say that Trump will win the state of Wisconsin. Shapiro will get Kamala over the edge in the state of Pennsylvania. However, I think that the blue wall breaks apart a little bit, and Wisconsin and Michigan, in that case, end up in Donald Trump's column, giving him a 293 to 245 electoral victory. As we sit here today, that is my prediction. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe on your way out. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more videos like this as we get closer to the 2024 presidential election.